Hi, welcome to Rock and Metal Invasion. My name is Steve. Coming up on the show today, we're doing Aldo Nova versus Honeymoon Suite, album versus album. And I've done this before, and I've got Tim to join me again to do it again. How you going, Tim?
I'm doing really good, Steve. We're hammering off a few of these, and these are a lot of fun to do.
Yeah, no, it's been awesome. Had a really great response to the Bon Jovi versus Def Leppard album matchups that we did, and of course we did Survivor versus Night Ranger as well. And yeah, Tim actually suggested this one, and I thought, yeah, perfect. It's like a bit of a Canadian Civil War, right? You know, Honeymoon Suite versus Aldo Nova, both Canadian. Well, Aldo Nova, of course, solo act, but he's Canadian, and yeah, Honeymoon Suite Canadian band. So you know, there's similarities in time. There's Aldo Nova came out a little bit earlier, but they match up pretty good. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4. I think there's just checking here. 5, is it? I think it's 5.
There's four albums. There's 3 albums in the 80s. They both did one in 1991, which is why I thought this might make a good matchup.
Yes, yeah. So 4. So well, we'll see how we go. Could be a draw, but we'll have to wait and see. All right. So do you want to start us off, Tim? Just I guess with some of your history of Aldo, Nova, and Honeymoon Suite, and then maybe start off with the first matchup.
Okay, sure. Yeah, Aldo Nova was his real name is Aldo. I'll probably get it wrong. Capriccio. It's an Italian name. He's from Montreal, and in the 70s, he at one point was portraying George Harrison in a production of Beatlemania. He eventually ended up somehow getting some recording time at the famous Power Station recording studio, which I think is now called Avatar Studios. And so he got to work, basically do these demos, and he was kind of a one-man band. I mean, he played guitar, he played keyboards, bass, he sang, he could arrange, and a lot of what ended up on his debut album are just from those demos. And so his first album, self-titled, came out in early 1982, went on to sell 2 million copies, and bolstered, of course, in no small part by the single Fantasy. That's his best-known song to this day. Honeymoon Suite, on the other hand, are named for their home base of Niagara Falls, Ontario, which is called the honeymoon capital of the world. And they formed in the early 80s. A lot of the guys in the bands had been in various sort of new wavy type bands, but they came together. They ended up winning a homegrown radio contest on Toronto's Q107 radio because of the song New Girl Now, which is one of their best known songs. So their debut album came out a couple years after Aldo in 1984. So as far as the first matchup goes, so start with the one that came out first, of course, Aldo Nova's first album from early 1982. There are varying reports on when the actual album came out. I tend to think it came out quite early because of when I can see it chart. And of course, I mean, the first track on the album is Fantasy, and it's one of the greatest, it's one of my favorite singles from the 80s. It's got it's a really cool mix of guitar and keyboards, and I don't think Aldo gets enough credit for bands that came after him that adopted that formula to great success, including a band we've already talked about, Bon Jovi, because Aldo got to know John Bon Jovi as a young, gopher at Power Station Studios. So they've known each other for years and years, and there's been some back and forth, which we'll get into. But Aldo basically played everything on that first album himself, except the drums. Most of the album was just him and overdubbing, and yet it sounds like a live band. And there's a lot more to this album than just Fantasy. I think it's got some great songs on it. Hot Love's another rocker. Heart to Heart's one of my favorites on there. Under the Gun, a couple of really great ballads. Ball and Chain, which should have been a really big hit. Also had Can't Stop Loving You. This album, I think it went platinum within its first year, and I'm talking in the States too. And eventually it was certified double platinum in 1994. So It's an album that sold well. Unfortunately, he couldn't follow it up success-wise, but that certainly doesn't mean that was the end of his, good music making. Now, Honeymoon Suite, on the other hand, were a band that came very, very close to cracking the US market, but didn't quite do it. And it's a very, very hard thing to do. There are very few acts from Canada that were able to gain success in the United States and sustain it. Bryan Adams did it, Rush did it, Triumph did it for a few years, Loverboy were quite successful at. And but Honeymoon Suite, something just didn't click, even though they certainly had all the ingredients for a big breakthrough. And their first album, very iconic album cover here in Canada with the Bed of Nails on it. This version that I have here is actually the Rock Candy reissue CD, which I would recommend because they have some bonus tracks, including a song that's a live version that never made any of their albums called We Got the Night. But this album had 4 singles off of it. I already mentioned New Girl Now. That was the first single. That did very well in Canada. It hit number 57 in the States. I think it hit number 7 on the mainstream rock chart. Burning in Love, one of my personal favorites, was a single. Wave Babies, that's sort of a poppy summertime song. And they also had Stay in the Light, which is a little bit more of their. The first Honeymoon Suite album's got a little bit of that new wave influence.
Yeah.
A little, especially on songs like It's Your Heart. And they could have kind of gone either way. I'm kind of glad they tilted to some more arena rock side. I think the first album is an exceptionally strong debut album. But in this matchup, I got to give it to Aldo because I just think his album's 10 good songs for 10 good songs. Whereas the HMS album is just a really good debut, but I like Aldo's album just a little bit more.
Cool. Awesome. Hey, thanks for that, Tim. That was a really great recap. So for me, I heard about Aldo Nova through Bon Jovi, right? So, I guess it was very late in the game, right? So this is like early 90s, I think, when I heard about him. Because same with Honeymoon Suite, not big in New Zealand, right? Not big. It didn't break into the States, not gonna become big names in New Zealand. So I didn't hear about Aldo until early 90s when I heard John Bon Jovi's writing and producing this album for this guy, right? So I'm thinking, well, if he's writing and producing it, it might be worth checking out. So in that sense, I've gone a little bit, I was sort of a little bit late, and obviously the debut wasn't the first Aldo that I heard. So that's kind of my history with Aldo, and then going back and then obviously checking out all the other albums. Honeymoon Suite's a little bit different. Just happened to come across not the first album, but the Big Prize. I came across that on cassette. This might have been like late 90s. So again, super late to this band, right? And saw that Bruce Fairbairn had produced it, and it was like $2. It was like a $2 cassette, and I was like, oh, well, it's Bruce Fairbairn. I mean, I don't know what this will be like, but pick it up. And I'm not going to go into, obviously, because we haven't got to that album yet, what I thought, but obviously I liked it enough to then go back and get their other albums. So so going on to the Aldo Nova debut, it's it's quite interesting that Fantasy was the big hit because it's a pretty heavy song. I think especially for 1982. And it was the song that obviously helped drive album sales. What I find interesting is, that song had really helped propel the success of the album. But then where did those people go for the follow-up albums, right? They just seem to disappear. But anyway, great song. Hot Love also, which is the next song, just when you think, oh, maybe they won't be able to match, you won't be able to match up with that song. I think that's almost just as good, if maybe not even better. It's equal, I think, for me. It's Too Late's all right. Ball and Chain is kind of a bit more of a ballad, bit of piano in that one. But like you said, it could have actually been a hit. Heart to Heart's a great up-tempo track to finish it. Fall in Yourself, I really like. I think that it's a real good template for Aldo Nova and his sort of the formula that he has with his, with his songwriting and the songs that he puts out. That's a really good example of it. Under the Gun, also one of my favorites. It's a really good song. And his guitar playing, I think he's an underrated guitarist. You don't really sort of hear him talked about as as a great guitarist, but because he does everything, and obviously he's an amazing musician because he's basically a one-man band. Like basically, he can put out an album and he does it all pretty much. He gets drum machines or gets someone to come in and do the drums, but very impressive. The last couple of tracks, they're okay. actually, for a ballad, "Can't Stop Loving You" is probably one of my favorite Aldo Nova ballads. I quite like that one. I do prefer the rockers, but that is a good song. So yeah, very strong album. Not surprised it was successful. Yeah, like I say, I'm just sort of surprised that no one sort of stuck with him after this album. But yeah, very good album. Honeymoon Suite, like you sort of touched on, there are some new wave elements. It doesn't quite sound like some of the albums that just a little bit different to the albums that came out after this. But yeah, I'm not surprised New Girl Now was a hit. Great song. But Burning in Love's also a great rocker. Really love that one. I find this album a little bit top heavy, and some of the better songs are at the start, fades away a little bit at the end. Wave Babies, I like the music video, but yeah, as a song, man, not so much. But Stay in the Light is, that brings it right back for me. A great 80s hard rock. I think that's one of their best songs on the album. And actually, Now That You Got Me, also almost as good as Stay in the Light. So, like I said, first side I really like. Funny Business, it's an upbeat sort of rocker. That's okay. Hard on Fire is actually not one of their songs. It's written by the guy who wrote "Hit Me With Your Best Shot," the Pat Benatar song.
Yeah,
so
Eddie Schwartz. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm not quite sure why they decided to do that, but that's an okay song, I suppose.
I think that was a record company thing.
Yeah, probably. Yeah. And that sort of fades away a little bit at the end. I mean, it's okay, but Honeymoon thing with Honeymoon Suite is like if they're either very good or I just don't mind them kind of songs. They don't really put out songs that are just like, that are just like, oh my gosh, I can't listen to it. They're very consistent. But yeah, like I say, I think for the really good songs, they're more on the side one. So it's a good album, but I'm like you, Tim. I'm afraid it's hard to beat this album. I think especially for its time, it is a great hard rock album. So that's going to be my winner for the first album battle, Aldo Nova.
Yeah, you bring up a good point. Yeah, you bring up a good point about that Aldo Nova album. So it kind of reminds me of we were talking about Survivor. They put out "Eye of the Tiger," which is a 2 million selling album, and then Caught in the Game comes out and it does nothing. So yeah. I have to think there's a lack of promotion going on there because it's not like people weren't appreciating what they did. Yeah. So Aldo follows his first album up in 1983 with a quasi-concept album. He really wanted to get adventurous. The record company kind of reined him in and said, hold up, we need some commercial songs. So it's a kind of a combination of both. So the album is called Subject Aldo Nova. And it's got this sort of computerized graphics on the cover, which I kind of dig. The album has one of his heaviest songs, and it was actually a single, "Monkey on Your Back," which is one of the very first sort of anti-drug songs. The video sort of portrays this, maybe a little bit dated now, but the message remains. Curiously, on this album, he covers a song that had only come out a year previous, "Hey Operator," by another one of my unsung Canadian bands, Coney Hatch. They had a big hit with it off their debut album in '82. I like the Coney Hatch version better, but one thing about Aldo Nova recording it, this album did eventually certify gold. So, Carl Dixon, who wrote the song, that probably helped him out a lot. But I think there's, the melodic rock is every bit as strong on Subject. I think songs like "All Night Long," "Always Be Mine," "Victim of a Broken Heart" should have been a hit ballad, "Cry Baby Cry." I just love this album from start to finish, and it is more electronic sounding. I think what you have here is a case of there's electronic drums, but it sounds like he's actually got someone playing them. He does have some other musicians on this album. One guy that he's got on a second guitar is named David Sykes. He would eventually join Boston in the 90s. So there's been a lot of famous players come through this band, including, I want to say Paul Taylor from Winger was with him for a while, like in the live band. And I almost think Bruce Kulick might have been, but I may have got that mixed up. But yeah, the album didn't sell nearly as well. It didn't have a big hit like Fantasy. Like I said, it eventually certified gold in '94. But yeah, I mean, it sold like a quarter as much as his first album. And you just have to wonder why, because to me, it's every bit as good, and maybe it didn't have that single to catch. "Monkey on Your Back" was a much heavier sounding song. It was menacing, but yet still melodic. I mean, when I say heavier, it's Aldo Nova, so it's not that heavy, but it's all by way of comparison. But no, I think it's a great album, and So that takes us to HMS. Their second album came out in, it says 1985 on every copy of it I've ever seen, but it actually came out in February '96, and it is the big prize, as you already talked about. This copy I have here, it's signed by all the band members. I saw them in 2008. They reunited with the original 5 guys, so it's one of those cases where, you didn't have to get 2 guys to sign it and then try to, no thanks, I don't want your signature, you didn't play on this. So I actually got all the signatures of the guys on this album. This album should have brought them the success that other bands were having. I mean, to me, this album has all of the things that made Bon Jovi Slippery When Wet a huge album. They had, they were popular with male and female audiences. They were accessible. And yeah, like you said, this album was produced by Bruce Fairbairn and engineered by Bob Rock. It's that dream team. And one story of how John Bon Jovi ended up getting Bruce Fairbairn to produce is listening to this album. Now, I've heard it's this album. I've heard it was the second Black and Blue album, Without Love. And I've also heard that Mike Reno, or he called Mike Reno from Loverboy. The truth is probably somewhere in the middle. Bob Rock says it's because of the big prize. So this album, like the first album, they both went triple platinum in Canada, 300,000 sold. Feel It Again was the first single. It's one of my all-time favorite songs. It's got the single to it up here. What Does It Take was another song from it. That was a power ballad that was in the movie One Crazy Summer. Should have done a lot better. In the States, Feel It Again was their only top 40 single. It hit 34. And What Does It Take peaked at number 52. I can't quite figure out what kept those from going even further, because they had what it took to become a big band. But it didn't stop there. I mean, the album tracks on this album are so strong. One by One and Wounded, Words in the Wind. There's All Along You Knew has an appearance from Ian Anderson from Jethro Tull on a flute solo. Once the Feeling, another great anthemic rocker. I mean, to me, this album just had everything going for it, for a major breakthrough for a rock band to break through to a wider audience. And I don't know, they had lots of shots. They had lots of big opening acts. They opened for Journey. They opened for 38 Special. It just didn't seem to click. I don't know if it was management or what, but it never quite gelled. And this one's probably the toughest one for me, because I really like both of these albums, but I'm giving it to the big prize.
Okay. All right. Nice. Hey, can I just see the back of the CD, of the big prize CD?
It's got this.
Right. Okay. So it's different to most.
Okay. So that's the back of the CD booklet.
Right. Yeah.
And I think the kids on the inner sleeve. I got to say, one interesting tidbit of information, because if I don't bring it up, somebody will say, "Why didn't you mention this?" This is a Hugh Syme album cover.
Oh, right.
And the guy who is the groom on here, his name, his first name is escaping me. I think his last name is Cunningham, but he is also pictured on the cover of Rush's album Power Windows. He's the real skinny guy with the remote control. It's the same guy. So I'm guessing those two album covers must have been done around the same time.
Okay.
Probably both from Toronto, but there you go.
Interesting. Yeah. No, I like the album cover, but I just think, again, I don't necessarily look at this and think this is going to be a rock album or a hard rock album, or like, for me, especially when if I'm the band's unfamiliar to me and I don't know, like, having this helps. If I'd seen that CD, I would have looked at the back and gone, nah. You know what I mean? So, because it didn't have the picture of the band, so I just that's why I was just curious about it. But all right. Aldo Nova. So subject, like you touched on, Tim. It's a concept album. I'm not really quite sure of the story. Do you know any? Have you followed this? Some sort of addiction?
Well, no. It was supposed to be sort of a post-apocalyptic thing. That's why one of the opening instrumentals is called Armageddon, and it's got the war suite and it's got Paradise. But I'd say the concept got very quickly whittled down. For in the favor of more conventional like love song type of lyrics. But I think that's what the remnants of his original concept. He was ambitious. He really wanted to go all out with it. But
Yeah, because like, you know, you've got a cover song on there, Hey Operator, so that surely doesn't fit in any context to the overall any
Yeah,
story
I
that
know.
you. And Monkey on Your Back, I know, is like about some, you know, having an addiction to something, right? Some sort of monkey on your back sort of thing. So yeah, so I was just wondering, but like you say, yeah, it's kind of futuristic, and yeah, so those sort of instrumental pieces, I think, is the concept element to it all, which is okay, but must admit there's actually only 8 songs, actual songs on the album, but
Right.
it's sort of
Yeah.
broken up with these sort of instrumental kind of things, and especially at the start, I think it has like 2 or 3 at the start, and it sort of like takes a while before you even get to Monkey on Your
It's
Back.
hard to tell where one ends and the other, yeah, because you've got
Yeah,
Armageddon and you've got Armageddon slash race cars, and
yeah.
I really enjoy it. But you're right, yeah. There's an awful lot, like there's a lot of like vignettes in between the
Mm.
songs.
Yeah, I probably could have done with maybe a little bit less because I feel like it breaks up the momentum a little bit. I think especially at the start, it's like, you know, at least give us a few, good songs at the start without this sort of, you know, one build up song would be fine, but I think it's like 3. But anyway, yeah. But the first proper track, Monkey on Your Back, yeah, that is such a great song. And when you think about the success he had with Fantasy, this seems like a sure thing, right? It's very sort of good hard rocking song. Sounds very much like Aldo Nova, 1983 when this comes out. Oh, yeah, it's like, I don't know, it just didn't work. Hey Operator is a great Tony Hatch song, so you know I have no complaints it being on here as well. But Cry Baby Cry is possibly one of my favorite Aldo Nova songs. I was playing yesterday and I was like, without even thinking about it, I was like air guitaring. You know, it's just like such a good song. Actually, I'm looking at the back for the sequence, but it's not actually in the right sequence on the back. But yeah, and then it's also got the song "Victim of a Broken Heart," which is quite a nice ballad. But what's interesting about that is also it's a co-write with a guy called Tony Bruno, who's
Yeah.
also known as Tony Ray, and he was in Soraya and Danger Danger. So that must be one of his
Oh, I didn't know
earliest.
that. Okay.
Yeah,
I didn't
yeah,
know
yeah,
that.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So that must have been one of his, you know, Tony. I don't know if it's Tony Ray or Tony Bruno. I think he has alternates both names, but yeah, that must have been one of his earlier things that he, and I guess getting together with Aldo Nova, and yeah, there's some Danger, of course, uh, connections there. And you know, you can one thing too we haven't mentioned about Aldo Nova. He wrote a song for Celine Dion, and that you can tell he can write hit songs. You know, so I'm not surprised that
Yeah.
he's,
Yeah.
you know,
Aldo
someone like,
Nova actually, I don't know, we can thank him or blame him, depending on your point of view, but Aldo Nova was kind of responsible for, because Celine Dion had quite a successful singing career in Quebec here in Canada in singing in French. But I think he had a lot to do with her transitioning into singing in English, and we all know what happened. So the fact that he has songs on
oh,
Celine
right.
Dion albums probably pays for all of his studio equipment and, and things like that. Yeah, he's an accomplished songwriter. You see his name pop up here and there. I mean, I think one of the songs he wrote for Celine Dion was also covered by Faith Hill, so there's some more
Yeah,
royalties for
right.
him. So yeah,
Sure. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. No, it probably did help him, especially through those sort of lean times that he's about to sort of
Yeah, yeah.
get into after Twitch. But yeah. So that's the first side, and then second side, another one of my favorite songs on side 2, "Hold Back the Night." Really good song. Really love that one. I think that was a single as well.
Yeah, there's a video for it.
Yeah, there's a couple music videos at least for this album, and they seem quite high budget. I mean, you look at them now, kind of like they're a bit laughable, sort of sci-fi kind of theme. There's almost a bit of a story, like we're saying, this is a concept sort of album. There's a bit of a story going on, but it's pretty cool. I enjoy it. I enjoy the music videos. So yeah, really good song. I think the album does fade out a little bit at the end there, but yeah, pretty good. I must admit, I see this album in bargain bins all the time, even here in New Zealand, or even if you go on Discogs, it's not an expensive album to buy. So they must have pressed quite a few in the hope, thinking it was going to be another platinum seller.
Sell as many as the first one. Yeah.
Yeah, and it just obviously that didn't happen. But you know, I find it interesting too that you know, for his next album, the record company said to him, "Oh, you know, we want this album to be next album to be a little bit more commercial." But to me, that is you know, the subject is commercial. It's like there's lots of
Yeah,
hits.
it's not really uncommercial. I just
No,
think that I don't know. I have to think the record company needs to take a little bit of responsibility in saying, well, he gave us a few hits, we just didn't turn them into hits for him.
yeah, yeah. Anyway, the big prize. So, like I said, this is my first sort of encounter with Honeymoon Suite. You know, I picked it up on cassette, so I wasn't expecting too much, but really, this is like late '90s. Put it on and played it, and I was like, "Damn, this is really good." And yeah, just it's spoiler. It's, you know, my favorite Honeymoon Suite album, and it's like one of my favorite albums of all time. It's just every song. Like, there's only one song that I'm not that into. Bad Attitude. I mean, Killer Riff kicks it off. Awesome. Feel It Again. It's just like such an anthem. You know, they're just all these anthems basically on this album. You know, it's
Yeah.
really uplifting kind of music. Like, I play this and it puts me in a good mood. You know.
Yeah, it's just like, yeah, it's good stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, Lost and Found, a good song. What Does It Take? Yeah, it's got some nice keyboards at the start of that one. Yeah. Oh, sorry, that's a ballad actually, but yeah, it's good. A little bit sappy, but you know, I don't mind. I actually quite like the lyrics. And yeah, One by One. That's the one with the good keyboards on it at
Yeah.
the start, and then the really some nice guitar comes in. Yeah, just yeah, all those 5 songs fantastic. Bad Attitude, Feel It Again, probably 2 of my favorites, and One by One. They're my 3 like really good ones. But yeah, all good. Second side, we're on to Wounded. Yeah, no, again, just really upbeat sort of songs. Words in the Wind. Again, really up tempo. Great. I like the intro. And you know, when I listen to this, I just think, oh, it's really a shame that they didn't work with Bruce Fairbairn again, because you know, he's really, it's just a great.
I think Bruce Fairbairn got tied up with bigger
Yeah.
clients, unfortunately. Bon Jovi, Aerosmith. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I can imagine that's probably what's happened, and it's sort of like, well, sorry, but yeah, it's just
The album sounds every bit as good as Slippery When Wet or Permanent
yeah,
Vacation. I mean, it's a pro sounding album. And I just want
yeah,
to say, how was Wounded not chosen as a single? Like, to me, that would have been an obvious choice for a
yeah,
single. Was the B side of Feel It Again, that they
yeah,
should have put that out as a single too. But
yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, it's hard for me to say, because I just think every song's like so great that it's like, well, anything could be a single. But yeah, all along you knew, like you said, the Ian Anderson on the flute. That's like came totally out of the blue, right? When I first heard it, I was like, what is this? But I really like it now. I'm really used to
it shouldn't work, but it does.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Once the Feeling actually reminds me a little bit of Bryan Adams. It just at the start where he does that sort of hey
Very
yell.
much.
Yeah, yeah. And the only song I'm not that fussed about, Take My Hand, but otherwise,
Same here. I think by then, you know, it's not bad, but the album is like, okay, you've proven your point. It's great.
yeah,
And
it's
that
fine.
just kind of fades. It's okay, but yeah, I fully agree with you. Like, to me, it almost could have been a 9-song album, but it's fine.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So obviously for me, it's the big prize, but yeah, not to say I don't really like Subject. I think Subject's a great follow up from the debut, possibly even equally as good as the debut. It's just Big Prize. So. Yeah. Big Prize, one of my favorite albums of all time. So yeah, that's a win there for Honeymoon Suite. So 1-1, both of us. So album's number 3.
Yeah, so it gets really interesting here with because Aldo Nova, for all intents and purposes, kind of disappeared, and what he ended up doing is he wanted to get out of his contract with CBS, or what eventually became Sony. So he ended up writing, you know, he did okay writing commercials. Like, he ended up doing like Chrysler commercials and Coke commercials, like behind the scenes, you know. And he's a real smart guy, and he, you know, eventually he found his way back into music, but we'll get to that. But you know, before he did his disappearing act, he put out his 3rd album in I think November '85 called Twitch, which I always kind of jokingly call his Miami Vice album cover. You know, I mean, he's got the pink guitar and he's got the suit, and they shot this in Antigua, I think. This album has about 1 million different musicians on it. Only 3 times does an actual drummer appear on this album, and that's one of the things that gets a lot of criticism. I would call this album a guilty pleasure because I think that underneath the very, very dated production, Aldo still continues to write catchy songs. I think that the opening, Tonight Lift Me Up, is one of his best songs ever. Most of these songs, I think, would benefit from a better production. I think If Looks Could Kill should have been a big hit single. That's super catchy. Fallen Angels, really good. Fallen Angels sounds like something that could have been on his first album. I think there's only one video from this album. It's for the second track, Rumors of You. And people that are into this type of AOR music will know the name Fiona. She was a solo artist in the 80s. Beau Hill produced most of her albums. She's actually sings part of the lyrics in the second verse, sort of a back and forth kind of thing. And it's not a bad song, but it's very keyboard heavy. It's very sequencer, drum machine. To enjoy this album at all, you have to take for granted that, yes, okay, this is a very dated sounding production. The songs that have drummers on them are the song Heartless, and I believe the drums are by Anton Fig.
Yeah.
But the way that it's produced, it really doesn't sound that different than a drum machine. Fallen Angel has drums from a guy named Alan Schwartzberg. You may see his name in a few places. I know that he played on, when I hear that name, the song I think of is I from Music from the Elder. Bob Ezrin had him play on that instead of Eric Carr for some reason. And the song Lay Your Love on Me, which to me, speaking of Kiss, it sounds like Aldo was trying to rewrite Heaven's on Fire. I get a big Heaven's on Fire from that song. And Billy Carmassi plays drums on that. Now, Billy is the brother of Denny Carmassi, who played in Montrose and Sammy Hagar's band and ended up in Heart and Coverdale Page, whatever.
Yeah.
That's those two are brothers. Another thing that your ears will probably, if you listen to the album now, if you listen to Lay Your Love on Me, especially that chorus, you'll go, that sounds like Michael Bolton. Well, it is. You have to remember, this is when Michael Bolton was in his AOR time, which never clicked for him until he changed his musical direction. But yeah, he's all over this album too, in background vocals. So yeah, it's an extremely dated sounding album, but I still think that there are a few winning tracks here that there's a likability. And because Aldo has so few albums, you try to like whatever he put out. On the other hand, HMS, to me, just went from strength to strength. So the Big Prize did very, very well for them in Canada. And I think one of the things that may have hurt them in the long run is that there was quite a gap between the Big Prize and Racing After Midnight. Lead singer Johnny D, who I think has a great rock radio voice. To me, he's like Don Barnes from 38 Special. You may not know the name, but you know the voice. It just suits this material so well. But he was in quite a bad motorcycle accident in 87, and that was up for quite a few months. And I don't know if it was that critical time and it just too much time had passed and people forgot. But I think it was March of 88, March or April, this album came out, Racing After Midnight. And it was the first time there was a lineup change. Ray Coburn, the original keyboard player, had left, who was replaced by Rob Pruce. Now, Rob Pruce has some serious new wave roots. He was in a Canadian band called The Spoons that weren't big anywhere outside of Canada, but they were a pretty big band in Canada for a while. And they were sort of I don't know if you'd call them like a Human League type of band, but they were basically a new wave band, and they had quite a few radio hits. But another big producer this time around, Ted Templeman, and they were a Warner Brothers band. So Ted Templeman was major. Not only was a producer, but he was like VP, I think, at Warner Brothers. So I mean, this has some big time production. Now, the first thing anyone got to hear from this album was they were commissioned to do the title song from the first Lethal Weapon film, which came out in 1987. And the song they did was actually written by the late Michael Kamen, the well-known orchestrator. And so they recorded it, and that was the first time they worked with Ted Templeman, and they ended up doing the whole album with him. That song, I remember being surprised when that came out, because when I heard that, I mean, obviously I was already a Honeymoon Suite fan. Honeymoon Suite are like one of the first bands that I was into from the get-go. I liked them from the first time I heard them. So I followed their career in real time. But when Lethal Weapon came out, it was not the song I was expecting. When I heard Honeymoon Suite were doing a song called Lethal Weapon from the movie Lethal Weapon, I'm thinking like a Danger Zone type of rock and roll song. And what you get is this sort of darker ballad, which I liked, but it wasn't quite what, and it didn't really become a hit, at least not in the States. But the album comes out almost a year later, and the first single is, I think, one of their best songs, Love Changes Everything. I mean, it was a big hit in Canada. I think it was a top 10 single. It only got to 91 in the States. I mean, this album just did not get pushed. And unfortunately, you know, it went double platinum in Canada, but none of their albums certified in the States. But I think this album is almost as good as The Big Prize. And that's saying a lot, considering how much I like The Big Prize. Looking Out for Number One is one of their best rockers. It's a great opener. Other Side of Midnight, they've opened a lot of their concerts with that one. That's another really fast one. Some great ballads. It's Over Now is a good one, a good ballad. Tears on the Page, good mid-tempo song. That could have been a single. It's a really good, strong album, but unfortunately, it just didn't click. And this was the last album they did for Warner Brothers worldwide. But I will say this: I had the Rock Candy. I've got the Rock Candy version of the first album. Do not get the Rock Candy reissue of this for any other reason than you want to read the liner notes, because Lethal Weapon is not on the Rock Candy reissue, which makes no sense to me. I think a reissue should never take away, only add. I do know that there's an issue with getting rights to songs for movies, but the Lethal Weapon soundtrack was on Warner Brothers, so I don't know what the disconnect is. And you can easily get some like best ofs by Honeymoon Suite. There's one called The Singles, and then there's another version of it called The Essentials. Those have Lethal Weapon on it. So if you can't find the original CD, it's not the end of the world. But I've just a 9-song album as a reissue just doesn't make any sense to me. Anyway, needless to say,
and usually the Rock Candy you get more, right? Usually and then they're great. They sound great.
You'll get a remix, or you get a single edit or something. There's a B-side floating around, you'll get it, but in this case, no, you don't. I should also mention that there is another Stray song they did called "Those Were the Days" that appeared on the 1986 soundtrack to the movie The Wraith, and it's a pretty good song. There's a really rare 2-disc version, a CD that came out in the mid 2000s called "Feel It Again," the anthology. It's on there if you can find it. That's the type of thing that would have been nice if it had shown up on the reissue. But as far as comparing the third Honeymoon Suite album to the third Aldo Nova album, I've got to give it to Racing After Midnight. I think it's a great album. I think it still holds up today. It's just a great 80s rock album. And it should have broke them. If The Big Prize didn't, then this one should have. Between the two of those albums, I don't think you can go wrong. If you like this type of music, I don't think you can go wrong with either of those albums.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, cool. Thanks, Tim. I like what you said about this perhaps being a guilty pleasure, as much as anything could be a guilty pleasure. I enjoy it. It's funny because, I think it sounds really good on my stereo. When I was playing it the other day, I was like, this sounds really good. It's like, okay, there's not real drummers on a lot of the tracks, but was it the Linn drum or something like that? Maybe they use
it's the Linn drum. Yeah, you can tell it's got shoot bars. Doesn't have the memory for more.
So it can date a little bit, but I mean, I don't mind. Maybe because I grew up in the 80s and listened to music from the 80s, and so it doesn't bother me. But I mean, I can imagine it might not be something some people like, but I think that's a really good song, really great. It's quite a good riff on there. It's good keyboard touches throughout the song, so really good. And Rumors of You, I thought it was really nice that Fiona Flanagan comes in and does like a duet with him. I thought that was quite a cool idea. So it's funny, she's not really, she's credited in the credits if you look really closely, but it's not like her name's not next to the song or any duet with Fiona or anything like that. But that's her on there, so that's cool. I thought, Surrender Your Heart's pretty good ballad. I don't mind it. But If Looks Could Kill, that's a really cool up tempo song. Again, nice guitar work. Sometimes I think this album gets talked about as just being too polished and everything like that, but it's still heavy. It still rocks. Yeah, it is. It is quite well produced, maybe overproduced, but You know, Heartless, that's really good, good guitar work on that one. Yeah, like you said, Anton Fig on drums on that one. Yeah, really good. That's one of my go-to songs. Fallen Angels also a really good song. That's you know, that's what would be one of my favorites. Classic sort of keyboard sort of stabs at the start of it. And some, you know, again, great guitar work. I mean, this is not an album full of ballads. There's some good rockers on it, but you know, talking of like power ballads, Stay, they had, yeah, they had hit
Yeah, that's a
potential.
good one too.
Yeah, and you know, maybe like you said, Tim, is there only one single maybe off this? I mean, I
I
don't
think
know.
it was just Rumors of You. I
Yeah,
think
I think, you
it's the
know,
only video anyway.
why not at least try maybe Stay, you know, as a potential single, you know, it's a ballad, you know, it's 1985. It could have done, you know, he just needed that one song, you know, to really break the album through. But yeah, and Twitch is the kind of the sort of like this instrumental bit at the end, which is yeah, not the
It's
greatest,
kind of
but
a throwaway, but you know,
yeah.
it's yeah, I used to crack up at it, you know, with all the laughing in the middle of it. I really don't know. I really don't know what the point of it was. Yeah, there's lots of great guitar work on this album too. You
Yeah, oh,
know,
totally.
you know, there were potential singles on here. I mean, just to give you some perspective, this album peaked at number 60 in Canada. It didn't even do well in Canada, and it didn't even chart in the States. So it was not promoted at all.
Yeah, yeah, and I think Aldo's that probably helped him become quite disillusioned. He becomes quite disillusioned with the music industry after
Yeah.
that album, and like you say, he kind of goes away for a little bit. Um, but anyway, Honeymoon Suite. So, as you know, big fan of the Big Prize. So this is the follow up, and yeah, Racing After Midnight. You know, I feel like they've worked out. Hey, we've got to let people know we're a rock band. So they've like got all their faces on the covers on this one.
Yeah.
They've got they
Yeah.
grow the hair out. If you know, because I think on the first album they had a bit of a new wave kind of look at times. They pretty much all got the long hair look now, and sort of you know, this cover reminds me very much of Europe Out of This World. Almost
Good
exactly,
point. Yeah. Same
exactly.
year. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. You know, and then there's good guitar at the back. So okay, these guys rock. If you didn't know that.
Derek Green is one of the most unsung guitar heroes too. I have to say,
Yeah,
he's you know, he's like the Eddie Van Halen of Canada. I mean, he's fantastic, and he's a good songwriter, and he's a pretty good singer in his own right. I mean, if you hear "Feel It Again," he sings those higher parts. So that's him.
yeah.
He's like the, you know, he's the Richie Sambora of this band, sort of thing.
Right, right. Yeah. I mean, and I tell you what, you know, I hear the guitar and I go, oh, that's distinctive. You know what I mean? He's just got his own little tone that I think is quite distinctive with his playing. So yeah, totally. Looking out for number one, great song. Again, very very catchy. I was thinking when I was listening to this, I was thinking this could be one of those songs, you know, where they have those try not to sing along to the song competitions. You know, you can't sing along. It's so you just want to sing when you sing along with it. It's just yeah, such a good song. Long Way Back. I actually like the lyrics on this one. Really good, good lyrics. And I will say, sometimes Honeymoon Suite, you know, because of the you know the timing or whatever. Maybe you know with the hair metal's kind of popular sort of thing at the time. They never really got into the hair metal type lyrics. There's a few maybe on the next album. There's a few, but I think lyrically they're a little bit more mature than some of the other rock bands coming out at the time. Cold Look is actually a cover of an I-10 song, so which is
Yeah.
called Taking It. It's called Taking a Cold Look,
Yeah.
but a good song. And I-10, I think they're a band that aren't that well known, but are known because I think two of the people are like major songwriters, aren't they?
Billy Steinberg and Tom Kelly,
Yeah,
and I'll tell you that there's 3 songs on that I-10 album
yeah,
that people that watch the show would know. The most well-known example, of course, is Hearts Alone. The original version of that was on there, but also REO Speedwagon did a song called I Don't Want to Lose You on there. It was one of the new songs on the Hits album, and the Cold Look. And I didn't know this for a long time. There's a video for Cold Look they did in England. I never saw it on Much Music in Canada, but there is a video for Cold Look. I didn't know that.
yeah.
And that's another rare example. And I think there must have been record company pressure to do an outside song, which is weird because they've already proven they can write hits. But anyway.
Yeah, it is weird, and it's a great song though, but it doesn't remind me of Honeymoon Suite. It actually reminds me of like Foreigner. I hear that song, and, oh, it's like the Foreigner.
Exactly. Yep.
you know, but which is not bad.
Especially Foreigner of that time.
Yeah, Foreigner of that time. It reminds me of that, which I love Foreigner of that time. So it's actually not a bad thing. But yeah, this was it was released as a single, but only in Europe, Tim. So yeah, and I think it did have hit potential, but I guess a lot of the songs did. Yeah, Love Fever. It's got a cool riff. But now again, when I hear this riff, this reminds me of Honeymoon Suite. So it's like very like I was saying before, he's got a very distinctive tone with his guitar, and it's like I heard that riff, like now this sounds like a Honeymoon Suite song. Yeah, other side of Midnight, yeah, it's catchy, but yeah, it's probably not one of my favorites. But Love Changes Everything. So I think this was the single, like you said, Tim. Yeah, really good. I mean, it is equivalent to any of the better songs from the Big Prize. So great choice as a single. Yeah, really good stuff. Fast Company, yeah, that's kind of it's a good sort of good rocker. Tears on the Page, yeah, I like the interplay between the guitar and the vocals on that one. And yeah, that's actually pretty good song actually. That's kind of the what I would say, like you sort of said, it's kind of where the album ends, but then we've got the soundtrack song, which, like you said, it's probably a bit disappointing that they didn't sort of. It wasn't more of a Danger Zone type song, but it is what it is. They didn't write it. Michael Kamen song, so. But yeah, it's okay. So it's close because I do really like Aldo Nova's Twitch album. But and this Honeymoon Suite album is not as good as the Big Prize, but I am going to go with Honeymoon Suite because it is still a very good album. So yeah, there we go. 2-1. We're both on the same page yet again. I think we were on the same page for Def Leppard Bon Jovi as well. So
I think so.
Yeah. But
So
they're close. They're close matchups.
So what happens now is, like I said, they both put albums up in 91. So for Aldo Nova, it was a long time sort of in the wilderness or, not in the spotlight again. In 1990, he collaborated with John Bon Jovi once again, and they worked on what became the Blaze of Glory Young Guns 2 soundtrack album. Aldo's credited all over that album with acoustic guitar and just basically being there during the recording of it. And as this is happening, they're starting to write songs. And because around this time, John was starting his own sort of, I guess, boutique label, Jamco, which didn't last very long. But this album came out on that label, and it was distributed by Mercury Polygram. And when I say this album, I'm talking about Blood on the Bricks, which came out in August of 1991. Now, where'd the book go? I really think that this album was a couple years too late. I think that by the time this came out, even though this type of music was still, by bands that were already established, was still quite popular, this album did not get the promotion it needed, and it sank without a trace. It ended up in the cutout bins, which I thought was such a shame. I had read that John was collaborating with Aldo, so I was kind of on the lookout for it. And I remember catching the video for the title song when it was halfway through, and I didn't know who it was. I just knew I liked the song, and I'm looking at the guys thinking, who is this? Because his look changed. He didn't look like he looked, on the earlier videos. And his band was actually, well, you may recognize the guitar player stand to Aldo's right. That's Phil X. Yeah. Now he doesn't play on this album, but he did the tour. Yeah, this is, it's probably when he and John Bon Jovi met, but this album, man, I think that they could have gone 3 or 4 singles deep with this album. Blood on the Bricks was a good song to intro it with because it's one of the heavier songs on the album. It was self-produced, like Aldo and John produced it. It was supposed to be Bruce Fairbairn or Bob Rock. I would have loved to have heard what it would have sounded like with one of them because I don't think it sounds quite tough enough. It doesn't have those big sounding drums. It's Kenny Aronoff on drums. It's great drums. It could have stood with a little bit more of that sort of tough sounding production, but a great album. full of great songs. And you know, a couple of songs which I, like I said, I could have been really big ballads in another time period. Those would be Someday and Hey Ronnie, Veronica's song. Touch of Madness could have been a radio hit. Young Love could have been a radio hit. Yeah, it's a shame that it disappeared, but I think it's got one of my favorite sort of heavier Aldo songs with the last song, Bright Lights. I think that's a really, really strong song. Just did not catch on, and he kind of disappeared for a while after that. Now with Honeymoon Suite, they weren't out of the spotlight that long, but unfortunately they lost their US deal with Warner Brothers. They stayed on Warner Music in Canada for one more album, which came out in late 91, Monsters Under the Bed. I've actually got, it's pretty rare vinyl I've got from Germany. And on this album, there's you know what Martin Popoff would refer to as a compromised lineup. So Gary Lalonde on bass and Dave Betts on drums are gone. They'd eventually come back. And you wouldn't think, okay, well, it's the rhythm section, Honeymoon Suite. They're not songwriters. What difference does it make? It doesn't sound quite the same. That doesn't mean it's a bad album. It's actually quite a good album. It starts off with one of my favorite Honeymoon Suite songs, Say You Don't Know Me. That's a song they still do in concert. It's one of the only ones they do from this album. I really like Little Sister. Like lyrically, that's a really, really serious song, but musically it just rocks. I think that How Long's a good ballad. Stand Alone's a good mid-tempo. It's good Honeymoon Suite. It's a little bit different. I think it did okay in Canada, but you know, this was the last album they did for sort of a major label. And I liked both of these albums. I listened to both of them a lot. I've got to give the nod to Aldo Nova though, because Blood on the Bricks, I think had the potential to be a big album. I don't know that Monsters Under the Bed would have. So.
Right. All right. Oh, well, that's 2-2 then, isn't it? 2-2 for you, Tim. Okay, excellent. All right. So yeah, Aldo Nova. So this is my first Aldo Nova album actually that I first hear, and it's based on the whole idea that, you know, John Bon Jovi's producing it and writing it. I did see online there's actually 3 music videos, which kind of surprised me. So Blood on the Bricks, Medicine Man, and Someday. And Medicine Man and Someday are kind of like the music video kind of carries on, I think, when it goes to Someday.
Yeah, that was a weird idea. Like, they should have put them out separately, because I think people were confused as to what the actual single was. But yeah, money was spent. I mean, those are big budget videos.
Yeah, it does appear that way, eh? So yeah, it definitely does. Anyway, Blood on the Bricks, yeah, the opening track. I mean, I think it's a perfectly fine first single. Certainly, you know, fitting that formula of, you know, kicking off with a you know, a rocker, you know, kick it off with as your first single. Of course, Medicine Man, also the second song. Again, though, I'd say for me, Blood on the Bricks and Medicine Man, they're good songs, but they don't scream like that's not gonna. I don't think, oh, that's a hit song. I think that's a good album track, but I'm not feeling like
exactly.
I'm not feeling like hit song on that one. Yeah, Bang Bang. It's sort of you can tell it's one of those Bon Jovi sort of songs, because it starts off with the bang bang chorus, you know. Yeah. So you know, but and actually when I heard this song, I'm thinking, oh, I've heard this before, and it's like, it sounds a lot like Bad Medicine, but maybe that's just me. But have a listen to Bang Bang, and then have a listen to Bad Medicine. Yeah, Someday. Now, I don't like this song particularly, but I can imagine, yeah, they're thinking this is going to be the ballad. Again, it does remind me of a Bon Jovi ballad, and most Bon Jovi ballads, apart from maybe Wanted, Dead or Alive, I'm not into. So that's possibly part of the problem for me anyway. Yeah, don't really like it that much. But interestingly, he co-wrote Someday with Rick Hughes from Sword, who's like that's like a full-on like metal band. And of course, he also then goes on to Saints and Sinners, which is a band that Aldo Nova produced, and I think he wrote some of the songs as well.
I think
and
so.
There's also, and actually also on that Saints and Sinners album, there's a Aldo Nova, John Bon Jovi song that they co-wrote, and they also
doesn't Rachel Bolan co-wrote
Rachel Bolan as well. Yeah, so it's Rachel Bolan also. So it's an interesting comment. Maybe it was planned for a Skid Row album. I don't know, but but I also you do from time to time see John Bon Jovi, Aldo Nova come up on other people's albums. You know, maybe they were leftover songs from this, but I know that Bangalore Choir have a Aldo Nova John Bon Jovi song on their album. So yeah, it's kind of interesting when you see that from time to time. But so I'm a little bit disappointed, I got to say. You know, Young Love. Yeah, I like the riff that kicks it off. It's one of the better songs on side one. That's another co-write. It's Jim Vallance actually on that
Jim
one.
Vallance.
Yeah. So I don't know how many times John Bon Jovi ever wrote with Jim Vallance. Maybe this is a one only.
You'd think it would be a lot, but they're like ships in the night. There's a lot of bands in common, but very rarely together.
Because, you know, Aerosmith had that Jim Vallance, but they also worked with Desmond Child kind of thing. But yeah, John Bon Jovi was more just Desmond Child. He didn't really sort of, but you know, Jim Vallance. It's always like when I'm looking at the credits. Oh, Jim Vallance, often a good song. I think he's, you know, obviously did the Bryan Adams stuff, but when he's been writing with some of these more heavier bands, they're good, you know, quite good songs. Side two. So yeah, I'm a bit disappointed with side one, hoping it picks up a little bit. Unfortunately, it's kind of more the same. I mean, Modern World, it's okay. Probably actually my favorite song on the album, out with Young Love, it could be. Hey Ronnie, I do quite like. I mean, it's as a ballad, that would be my preference of the ballads.
That's very much in the Bon Jovi sort of storytelling.
I was just going to say that biographical, autobiographical kind of lyrics there. Ah, yes,
very like a never say goodbye kind of song.
Yeah, very Bon Jovi. And Touch of Madness. You know, it sounding a little bit more. That one I thought sounded a little bit more like Aldo Nova and less like Bon Jovi. In fact, even I got some Def Leppard vibes from that one. But I know what you mean. But my least favorite Aldo Nova album, I have to say, which is really surprising because it's the first one I heard and it's got the John Bon Jovi connection, but yeah, it just is for whatever reason. So Honeymoon Suite, I do actually happen to have it on vinyl, which is it's not easy to get.
I've got to get Blood on the Bricks on vinyl. I don't have that on vinyl.
I don't think that's too difficult, but yeah, probably not super easy. You talked about it being a compromised lineup, so yeah, you can even see on the inset there's only 3 of them there.
Yeah, so it's like what Journey did on Raised on Radio. They just
so they've got Paul Northfield producing, who is a name I see from time to time, but not as big a name, obviously, as
he's usually listed as an engineer. But
not as big a name as they've had, but the album sounds great. I mean, So You Don't Know Me, really, I really like that one. Really great. I mean, for me, it equals anything from their previous 2 albums as a song, quality of song. I think it's great. I enjoy the video. I think the video is really cool.
I think it's the only video they did from that album, actually. But yeah, it's a cool black and white video. I remember when it first came.
Black and white, that's right. Yeah, no, it's good. You know, for its time, I think it's pretty cool. Bring On the Lights, some quite nice sort of fast guitar work kicking that off. But it's also, the Honeymoon Suite. I mean, I'm not someone who dances, but you can kind of like dance to their music, like I can imagine. You can still dance to it, you can sing to it. It's really good stuff. And now I thought If You Love Me, which the 3rd track, it's kind of like rock and roll hair metal. That's kind of what I thought when I heard that one. It's some of the lyrics on this album.
It's a little silly.
Yeah,
it's a little silly. Yeah,
not quite so good as maybe on some of their previous ones. And The Road, I thought got a little bit too pop. They kind of remind me a little bit of Glass Tiger. You know Glass Tiger?
Oh yeah, I can hear that.
Yeah, and I like some Glass Tiger songs, but the problem with them for me is they don't quite just get that little bit heavy enough for me to really get fully invested in them. Well, Honeymoon Suite do, but on that song, I felt they're getting a little bit too pop rock and not sort of hard rock. But yeah, Little Sister's a good song. It's got a nice riff at the start. But then probably the start's probably the best bit. And then what have we got? How Long to finish off the side one. I'm not sure about the lyrics on that one, but it's almost like they might be talking about some environmental awareness or something like that. But I thought that was better lyrically. That was better, and actually could have been a single. Yeah, Come Let Me Take You There, that very distinctive Honeymoon Suite guitar on that one, I thought it was good. But yeah, probably just some of the songs on side two. When I was playing it the other day, I thought it's not instantly as memorable as the songs from their previous album. I'm like, oh, how does that song go? Well, the other songs are like, oh yes, I know this song. So yeah, just not quite as catchy. Yeah. All I Wanted, though, I thought that was a great finish. It's a good song, has many of the
Yeah.
elements that
I like Standalone too. To me, Standalone sounds like a pretty classic Honeymoon Suite chorus.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
anthem.
yeah, yeah. So no, it's still a good album, really good. I think their previous to it, excellent. I'd probably put this more in the very good, previous to excellent category. But yeah, so I'm going to go with Honeymoon Suite. So we're not on the same page quite
That's the
here.
only that's the only time
The only
differ,
difference,
yeah.
yeah. So
And not and I also wanted to I did want to mention that to bring things up to the present.
oh yeah,
Like Aldo Nova hadn't done a lot of albums, but he finally did get to do his concept album. There's still supposed to be the full version of it come out, but The Life and Times of Eddie Gage, this is a 10-song, I guess, a preview. There's some really, really good songs on here.
no, I haven't heard it.
John
Okay.
T. Snow and I did a review episode of this. We're both pretty big fans, and I really like a lot of the songs in this. I highly recommend checking it out. He also put out a couple of EPs, which I think you can only get on his website. They have each songs on them. Now, this one actually has vocal songs. These are quote unquote regular songs. This is more experimental stuff, but worth checking out if you're a big fan. And just this year, Honeymoon Suite put out, I think, a fine album called Alive. So we're just talking about the first 4 albums because they end at the same time period. But for
Yeah.
those that are curious, these artists are still making music. Now, as a matter of fact, I think they've played some bills together. Unfortunately, none of them around my area, but
I saw an interview Aldo Nova did recently, I think, at the M3 festival. I think he was at the M3
yeah.
festival. So that's great that he's getting out there and doing, big concerts like that. I think it's awesome.
Yeah.
But and I know that in the late '90s he put out an album called Nova's Dream, Dream or something
Nova's
like that.
Dream, yeah, which
And
is
I was like,
a really experimental.
yeah.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, super excited about it because I was like, oh yes, great, new Aldo Nova. Picked, and it was quite expensive for me to buy it. It was import or something. I was like, oh, so depressed afterwards.
Yeah, it's not an Aldo Nova album per se. I mean, it is, but there's a few vocal tracks on it, a few regular type songs on it, but there's a lot of it's very experimental. It sounds like he's making the music he wants to make, but I do think that if you like most of what he's done, I think that you'll enjoy. I would recommend you seek this out.
Sure.
I think there's some really good songs on it, and yeah, man, I would have loved to have been at that M3 festival. I mean, Aldo Nova, Y&T, Night Ranger. That would have been killer.
Yeah.
And I guess Pat Sajak was there too, of all people. Wheel of Fortune. It doesn't even make sense, but yeah.
Yeah, and of course, like you said, Honeymoon Suite. That's because I'm actually not really up on Honeymoon Suite after Monsters Under the Bed, but I know that you and Grant, I think, talked about Honeymoon Suite all the way, like all their other albums post that you did like a bit of review and stuff, which was interesting.
Yeah.
You were pretty, you were both pretty
it's
positive.
A scattered catalog. They did Dreamland, and then in some places it was called Lemon Tongue, and a lot of the songs are the same, but not all of them. Clifton Hill, which they did in 2008, is a great return to form for them. The Lemon Tongue Dreamland stuff, I can always compare that to Def Leppard's Slang. It's quite a bit different. It's not bad. It just doesn't sound really like Honeymoon Suite. Clifton Hill sounds like Honeymoon Suite. It's got those catchy, upbeat, anthemic songs. And that actually just got reissued last year. It's called Clifton Hill Revisited. And it even goes so far as to put another black and white photo from Niagara Falls on it. So they were really reaching back for their roots on that one. So that's really good. And Aldo, like after Nova's Dream, this is the first new music he put out, other than he re-recorded a bunch of his older songs, which results vary on that.
Good. It's like 2.0 or something, isn't it?
So, Reloaded 2.0.
Yeah.
One thing I noticed about that some of them are good, some of them, you stick to the originals, but what I wished he would have done with that is redone some of the songs from Twitch, because I think they would have
Yeah,
benefited from a more rocking production. But
that's a
you know,
good point.
you could go on YouTube, and Aldo's in his studio basically playing guitar and singing to his own backing tracks on a lot of those classic
Yeah,
songs. So no, he's
yeah.
a talented guy, and yeah, I think that more people, you know, I like getting the word out. There's more to him than just fantasy in that first album.
Yeah, yeah. All right, awesome. Hey, it's been great catching up with you again, Tim, and doing this. Yeah, really good. Maybe we'll do another one some other time when we come up with a good idea. But I think yeah, really good to sort of cover those two or two bands, or Aldo and Honeymoon Suite. They kind of match up quite nicely. Yeah, and if you haven't checked them out, go check them out because there's some great music there. Let us know what you think in the comments. What are your favorite albums from Honeymoon Suite and Aldo Nova? Do you agree with our assessments of what album won the album matchups? And of course, make sure you check out Tim's channel, Tim Vinyl Confession, fantastic channel. If you like this type of music, his channel also covers a lot of that same type of music. Anything you want to promote before we go, Tim? I know you've always got something on the go.
I've got a lot of cool episodes coming up, and I've got a big project that I'm not sure when this is going to air, and I'm not quite ready to announce it yet. But yeah, I've got something up my sleeve, and yeah, just going to be doing more shows. Keep it going.
Awesome. All right, that's it for today. We'll catch you later. Okay, see ya.